Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Z, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, we are going to talk about something so important in the process of healing. We always talk about how to identify a narcissist, how to deal with narcissistic abuse, how to set boundaries in narcissistic abuse. But one of the things, and in this podcast, in the series that I really want to touch on, is the survival, is the process of healing, is once you get out of these relationships, what do you do next? How do you become the best version of yourself given everything you've endured? And today, that is what we're going to start talking about. And I am so honored and lucky to have our guest, Karena Dawn, with us today. A little bit about Karena, and I'm going to do her no justice by reading this because she is just one badass, amazing woman. So for more than a decade, Karena Dawn has empowered millions of women in the world to live their healthiest and happiest lives. Her lifelong passion for fitness, mindfulness, and spiritual empowerment has made her a global leader in the wellness space. She's been featured in Forbes for creating a fitness empire. She's also headlined the Pop Sugar Playgrounds Festival and has been a keynote speaker at the Power Up Women's Conference. She's a mindful meditation coach and a regularly featured speaker and instructor for TED Women and other national platforms. So please enjoy this episode with Karena. Again, we are really fortunate to have her, and I think you're going to learn a ton of information about this. So I'm so excited to be here with you today, and I cannot wait to get started on this topic. As I had said earlier, one of the things that I hear about from so many people is, yes, I know my ex is a narcissist. Yes, I know that my mother or my father or my sibling or my boss was a narcissist. I get all that. I know what I had to do to leave. I get all that. But now what do I do with all this quote, and people will call it this all the time, wasted time, all this time I spent dealing with this and being in this traumatic situation and wasting years and talent and my voice. And the reason why I really wanted you here today, other than the fact that I adore you and I think you're brilliant, is I think it's so important for other people to hear other people's stories of survival. It's not just a psychologist yapping away what you need to be doing. So I'm really going to kind of let you take it and just kind of give an overview of your story, wherever you want to start, where you think is most relevant. And then I'm just going to kind of pick your brain as far as how you got through it and continue to get through it, because it's a process.
Yeah, it is a process, pointing that out, and it still is. And I would say I am narcissist free as of the end of last year. Thank you.
Yay!
You have been my go-to, obviously, first on my podcast, and then really connected with you, and then working with you. It's been amazing, and you've given me so much guidance. So number one,
You're very welcome.
yeah, I think I want to start with me not even knowing I had a narcissistic parent.
Yes. Yep.
And my late mother, who also suffered from a mental illness, she was diagnosed schizophrenia and suffered from depression until the end of her life in 2021. In the last 5 years of her life, I became her caretaker, along with my husband, and because I overgiver, but
Overgiver. I know well.
And I was in there seeing a psychiatrist with my mother, trying to heal this mother-daughter wound that was there. And so we would see a psychiatrist together, and then we would see a psychiatrist apart. And the psychiatrist said to me when I was on my one-on-one with her, she's like, "You know, your mother's a narcissist." And I was like, "What?" I've never, but this is like before narcissism was the big word it is now. And so another thing I had to learn more about, and the psychiatrist said, your mother loves you, but she doesn't know how, and she will never love you the way you want to be loved.
Ouch.
Noted. Okay. So I'm here trying to heal this relationship, thinking I can do more. I can be a better daughter. I can do this. I can offer more. I can take care of her, make her live 5 years long, help her live 5 years longer, all the things, but then realizing like she's not going to change, Karena. Okay. So I soaked that in.
So can I ask you about, I want to ask you about that soaking in moment, because when I work with people, there's two big moments where it's really a gut punch. And as I like to say, a total mind fuck. And this
Yeah.
is one of them where you realize, wait, hold on. Not only do they not love me the way I thought they could and how I deserve to be loved, but they're never going to change. This is my only my only mother,
Mhm.
and I'm never going to have that.
Yeah.
And all these years of putting in the work, and for what? And so this is a point a lot of people get to where it's almost like a sense of hopelessness. And
Mhm.
it's a very fine line, because when you talk about your parents, it's supposed to be unconditional, right? Um, so I'm curious, kind of in that moment, for the people listening who are in that moment, what did you kind of say to yourself or do to wrap your mind around such a unbelievably foreign concept?
For me, let's remember I grew up and had a schizophrenic mother for, by this time, I was 37, 38, so my entire life. So nothing shocks me too much anymore.
Yes,
But at
valid
the
point.
time, same time, I always have that little glimpse of hope. That's just who I am.
Yeah.
Business, friendships, any relationships, that glimpse of hope. Like I always see the good, like it's gonna happen.
Mhm.
And I really thought that my bringing my mom back into my life, I would have a mother. And so in that moment when I was told by a professional that my mother will never be able to love me the way I feel that I'm deserving, she just can't, she's not capable. It's a little
Mhm.
in your head, like I need to listen to what she's saying because I need to take my expectations out and I need to figure out what's healthy for me and boundaries, realizing that I'm giving, thinking I'm going to have this. My mom and I are going to go to lunch and get our nails done and go shopping and this and have deep conversations. And she's going to ask me about my life and what I
Mhm.
did when she was away from the home all those years. And I just realized like that's never going to be there. And so I had to figure out how I accept that and then go into like, inner child work, healing myself from realizing I will never have a mother.
Did you feel that it was an odd relief in a way that you
Yeah,
could stop?
because then it made sense. Like
Yes.
I could tell, like, why are you not loving me the way? Why? Because I had a conversation with her before I had this doctor tell me this, and I was sitting in the apartment I got her, and we were sitting on the couch. And I was trying to have a good conversation, and I was like, "Mom, tell me what you were doing those years when you were gone and in Alaska fishing and in Georgia and homeless." And I just wanted to get to know her. And she was talking and telling stories, and I loved it. And I got to know more about what she was gone in all those missing years. And then that was it. And I sat there and I was like, "Do you want to know anything about me?" And she said, "Oh, well, I just assume you and Dad and Rachel were sitting at home for family dinners every night." I was like,
Mm,
mm,
no.
that's
Right.
not the facts.
Right. Right.
It's kind
Right.
of like that realization of, and like, and that hurt as a child. I'm like, why doesn't she
Sure.
know anything about me?
It shows that disconnect, that inability to acknowledge other people's points of views, emotions, livelihoods.
Yeah. But yeah. So I had to work through that, set the boundaries, stop, you know, giving so much, but making sure she was safe and had her needs met, but really just letting myself be free. And it was a really hard time for me. Push pull. I want to give more. I don't. It's very difficult. And I would say when she passed, and actually in my book, I just finished the audiobook version this week, and I realized my last sentence in the book after she passed was like, and now the healing begins.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, there's always the healing. And then we can talk about tools that I've been able to use for that process, which is
Mm-hmm.
the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to ask you and talk to you too about growing up with a mother like that, and then the people that you attract into your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think we'll start with narcissism. I think I have two answers to that. There's a big misconception that people who are narcissists only gravitate towards people who are weak-minded, who don't have a backbone, who are dependent and needy, and that's not true. And I'll tell you when that is true, but that is not true. And I want people out there to know that, even if you were raised by a narcissistic parent, that it doesn't mean that you're going to. Well, let me hold that for 1 second. Just generally speaking, narcissists will gravitate towards anybody. They don't care. They literally will gravitate towards anybody. One of the reasons why, though, it is really a myth that they gravitate towards people who are weak or who don't, aren't really confident in themselves, is because narcissists like people who are strong and successful and opinionated and attractive and well known in the community, because it looks good for them. It looks good for them to have someone like that on their arm. They like that. They want that limelight. They want to share that with you. The other reason, and this is one of those things I always say, that, just when you think you've heard enough, you always hear one of those things that makes the hair stand up in the back of your neck. This is one of those things. The other reasons why they gravitate towards people who are like that, not just because they want that life, but it's a further way down to knock them down. They have more room to fall. They get supply from watching you go from a successful CEO to depressed and anxious, not being able to get out of your bed, not having any confidence in your work product whatsoever, and worrying that nobody is listening to you at work, and then thinking you're a complete and total failure. I mean, that fall is a lot higher and a lot more supply for a narcissist than somebody who would never have been in that situation as a CEO in the first place, let's say. Now, that being said, do people who, let's say, have narcissists in their family, or who are raised by narcissists, or raised by people who have toxic upbringing, so neglect, for example, is a big one, physical abuse, uncertain parenting, flying off the handle, then loving you, like you had mentioned, that push pull, never knowing what you're going to get, that pattern. So if you take away what's causing the pattern, you take away the neglect, the physical abuse, emotional abuse, take away how it's dressed up, and look at the function of it. The function of it is inconsistency, of never knowing what you're going to get. So what you do as a child is you then tend to look for that same function.
Is that
Doesn't matter how it's dressed up, right? Because you're an expert
in that
at
situation?
that function, right? And even though it's clearly, we know it's unhealthy, but we also know it's familiar. And as creatures of habit, we gravitate towards what's familiar. We like our routine. We like our structure, even if it's unhealthy. And I'm sure you see this in the fitness world all the time, right? So you want to try to look at it from the standpoint of, am I doing X, Y, and Z because it's familiar? Or am I doing X, Y, and Z because it's healthy? Because oftentimes the two are not the same thing.
Yeah. And so I, as you know, have fallen into the familiar. I'm used
We
to
all do.
not anymore. Not anymore. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm used to chaos. It's
Yep.
like I find found the comfort in the chaos. I can handle this.
Mm-hmm.
This is something, a relationship and friendship and business and work and
Yep.
like is chaos. Of course, that's how I was raised.
Mm-hmm. And stability is probably felt boring and non-productive
Yeah. Yeah.
for
And
at first.
yeah. I'm grateful that in my romantic partnership, I was able to find, didn't draw that in.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
and I feel like as I've gotten older, I'm able to realize pretty quickly now. I mean, in the past, it took me a long time to realize, but now I'm very cautious of who I bring into my life because I realize how long it takes to recover. And I am in recovery now.
I love that you just said that. You know, we are people that like to get rid of discomfort immediately, and we're not very good at sitting with it.
Mhm.
And we tend to act in service of our emotions. And so the fact that you just said that you are able to pause and look ahead a little bit and use your experience of, it was so hard for me to get to this point. I refuse to go through it again, even though in the immediate moment, it may be easier. You hold on to that nugget of experience that you have that you know is going to be a hell of a lot difficult later on. And that's all. From a therapeutic standpoint, I will tell you that is the hardest thing to teach my patients. Exactly what you said right there is holding on to your discomfort in the immediate moment, knowing that down the road, it's going to make it a hell of a lot less.
Yeah. I'll tell you, after we had a conversation end of last year, and I made some shifts last year, and even Bobby, my husband, was like, within a week, he's like, you look and feel so much lighter. And I had heard that from like 3 people, actually. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, like what being in those relationships really does to your mind, your body, your soul.
Yes.
I obviously went through my own, after losing my mother and like trying to figure that all out, my own depression and then these other relationships that I realized were not good with me. Why was my anxiety showing up so much? Why was I not wanting to get out of bed? Why was I not excited about this and that and things that I love? And because I'm walking on shells or this or that, and having toxic conversations and little things. And even talking with you and learning and like, and being like, oh my gosh, this moment, this moment, this moment. And it all started to add up. And I'm like, you're not crazy, Karena.
Correct. You are far from crazy. That's right.
And
What a moment.
yeah, it's like this, again, the weight comes off. It's like,
Yes.
I can
Yes.
breathe.
You can breathe.
And, uh, and then the healing begins. And that's where I'm at. And I believe you're asking like that process and what I'm doing for
I
that.
would love, yeah. And I would, and it's such a visceral response, and you can see it. I mean, for those of you that are watching this, you can see your body, even just the way you said it, just, you saw your shoulders just go up and then just go down further from where you started them from. Um, can you talk a little bit? Because again, I think there's still this stigma out there that mental health is in your mind and in your mind only. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Can you talk a little bit about in your experience and what you do for a living and why you went in the direction that you did and how that kind of, I know it's a loaded question, but how it relates to why the mind, the body, spiritual, it's not separate. It's all interconnected. And when you heal, you have to heal all of that, not just one aspect.
Yeah. So I got into the fitness world as my career because after I went through a very dark period, growing up in the 90s, and my mom was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and she was in and out of the house, missing persons, Jane Does in hospitals. And had no clue what was going on, and no one was talking about it. So I made a lot of uh, not great decisions for my mind, body, and my soul. Drugs,
Sure.
this, suicide survivor, all the things. And then in my early 20s, when I was like, this is not like, you have to listen to your instinct.
Yes.
Because it was like my first instinct, which I actually, when I think back, I didn't believe it. I thought I was going to end up like my mother. And then, but always in the back of my mind, I was like, that's not true. That's not true. And then I was like, no, self-sabotage, self-sabotage. Like, that is true. And then finally, this instinct came. I was like, you're meant to be something greater than what you're doing right now with your life. And I thought back of when I was my happiest, and I ran a half marathon as a kid. For my first grade class, I did a workout video, And because my mom used to work out to VHS tapes in the living room before she got sick, and I would just watch her and be like, one day I want to be like Jane Fonda.
Mm-hmm.
you know, so I just started working out again. I started surfing. I started training for triathlon. I always wanted to be a fitness trainer as a kid. I'm like, Karena, go do it. So I got my certifications, um, did all that stuff. And I just slowly started healing myself through fitness and meditation and yoga and sunlight and all the things that just made me feel good. A ton of self-help books and going to therapy. It's not easy. It is not
Mm-hmm.
easy. And then started tone it up to share the message of fitness and movement and mindfulness. And now with the big silence, talking about mental health. So it's all kind of taken what I went through in my youth and then figuring out how I healed myself naturally, and then opening up that stigma so that other people with the big silence, so that other people don't have to suffer in silence.
Ooh, I love that. And I have the resiliency that you show, and I've said this to you before, is just absolutely unbelievable, because truth be told, the odds are stacked against you, and you did it anyway.
Thank you.
Really.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I will say it is harder to change to more and be more positive and take care of yourself than it is to stay in that dark place
Oh,
and
yeah.
just settle in there. But once you do that hard work, you start like the mental change, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll be so proud of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see, like, thank God I made that change.
And I think that goes back to what we were saying, is that, you were probably an expert at being in that dark place.
Yeah.
You could predict what was going to come next in that dark space. You could handle whatever was thrown your way. Now, that being said, obviously it's not a healthy space to be in, but when you don't have the resources, when you don't have anyone pulling you out. So that's the thing I think sometimes people get lost in, is that when you're in this dark space, there's a couple things that happen. One, people on the outside may think you're fine,
Mm.
because there's a lot of shame and guilt with kids. They don't talk about it a lot. They don't want people to know they feel it's their fault. It's embarrassing for them. And, they just assume that they're unlucky and everybody else has it great. Right now, as adults, we know that's far from the truth. But, to be in that, I just want people listening, that to be in that dark place. And we see this a lot with narcissistic abuse, especially in domestic violence and in intimate relationships. People don't even know that they're in a dark place. So there's even a step before that, where you don't even know what you don't know. And then you realize, like, oh shit, wait, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Wait. And then comes the shame and the guilt, and to be able to pull yourself out with
Mm.
no one reaching a hand in to pull you out is so unbelievably difficult. And it takes a ton of resiliency. And again, for those listening, if you wait to get pulled out by somebody else, if you wait to pull yourself out until you're ready or you're less scared, you're going to be waiting a long time. And I think that's what Karina is getting at, is that yeah, you have, it's not fair. None of this is fair. And it's not fair that you have to pull yourself out on your own, but you have to pull yourself out on your own. And once you take a step out, then you can connect with resources. But it's that initial step that is really scary, because everyone in that space, they're going to try to pull you back in.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It is. And I can attest to that. Like, phrase, like, nobody's going to save you.
Mm-mm.
And
They may help you, but they're not going to save you.
yeah, it has to be all you. Yeah. And one of the things too, that came in my mind, of even part of the healing process, is when I was in my early 20s and I was like, when was I happiest? I remembered being a kid. And even in more recent years, I went back to that same thing. When was I my happiest? And it goes back to being a kid, because when we're a kid, we're so free and happy. And like, what did I love doing? Okay, Karena, get your butt back in the gym. Start working out. That makes you happy. Start painting again, painted as a kid, get out in nature and play, like all those little things that we take for granted when we are maybe in this anxious, depressed state. And I have, I do this thing where I like to gamify things too.
Yes, yes, yes.
Where I'm like, okay, 21 days. You only have to do this for 21 days because it
Yes.
creates a habit, and you're going to work out every day, like 20 minutes of cardio and maybe 20 minutes of yoga or weightlifting, whatever. Get out in nature every day. I like to do hot and cold therapy. It just mentally really
Hmm.
makes me feel good. And it sounds simple, but shower every day.
What? What do you mean? But you guys weren't on here at first, but when I came on, I made it very known to Karena that I had not showered.
That's it. This is just like when I'm getting out of a rut, I'm like,
Yeah.
shower, put yourself together every
Listen, it's hard to shower. It is to get yourself up and out of bed and into the shower, even when you're not in a state of depression, is difficult. So, like, it
day. But
sounds easy, but it's not easy.
I know. And even if I do this when I'm like in a good place, but sometimes I get off track from my schedule.
Yeah.
Like I'm very good with routine. So if I get
Yeah.
thrown off routine, I go back to this. Okay, 20. I'm day 5 right now because I was traveling so much. Yay.
Yeah.
I had no routine. And then I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh, great, you're doing this. But yeah, just getting yourself back in a routine because I believe, when you're in an abusive relationship, you just it's such a dark place, and self-care, as simple as that sounds,
Hmm.
thing that has really helped me.
So, what would you say for people who are listening then? Because we hear this all the time, right, on social media. Like, you have to put yourself first and you have to take small baby steps. And I'll have people that'll say, if you tell me to go to the gym, I'm going to scream, right? And these are people, let's say that they've never gone to the gym before. They're never going to go to the gym. And like that strategy for them isn't going to work. And so, or they, like, what do you mean go outside in the sun? We know these things are important, but you don't have to do it the way that you do it or the way that I do it. You can do a modified version of these self-care things. So can you kind of take us through some steps and kind of tangible steps that people who are listening can use and slowly build themselves up?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had to use these tiny steps before too. And it's not, I know it's such a big deal to like go to the gym, or such a big deal to be like out for 45 minutes or
Mm-hmm.
go outside and I don't want to. I just want to lay here.
Yep.
But I always say, number one, for meditation, 60 seconds. First time, 60 seconds. Sometimes it turns into 2 minutes of just breathing and being present with your body. And maybe that 2 minutes turns into 5 eventually. Same with the workout. You don't feel like getting out of bed and working out today. Okay, but what if it's just 10 minutes of your life and see how you feel? 10 minutes of walking around the block, 10 minutes of stretching, 10 minutes of just anything. It really doesn't have to be, it's not an all or nothing game at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to take that pressure off of being all or nothing. And then, for me, I just, I will recently, I'm like, I don't want to work out. And I kind of like drag my feet around. I'm like, just go 10 minutes. And guess what? I did 20. Great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I felt great. And then also, you'll see even your family members too, when you start making those healthy habits. Maybe there's someone in your household who's kind of down, but then they witness you making these healthy habits and witness you feeling good and having more energy, more creativity, and they'll end up joining you. And
Mm-hmm.
I see it with Bobby too. Like, even I'm on day 5, on day 3, he's like, can I join you today? And then
I
he
love
did.
it.
Like,
I
he's
love
like,
it.
so much energy. I'm like, I feel great. And then he's like, wow, I feel so good. I'm like, yeah. And, it's the little steps that
Yeah.
have the big.
Tell me how when you said that you even feel physically different, that people were noticing that you even appear different, something about your vibe, your aura, whatever you want to call it. Um, can you kind of put into words how those small changes kind of transform what you tend to give off to those around you? Because I think that's really important for people.
Yeah. I mean, I would say when I was surrounded by some narcissistic relationships, I was just gloom. You're not smiling as much. I actually had a lot of skin rashes, eczema, psoriasis.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't have motivation to put myself together. I think my stress hormones,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and that typically I wouldn't have. And then it just, again, when it's like you get lighter all around,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a lot to be in a relationship like that. And I realize too, and maybe, like sometimes you can't escape, like if it's
Correct.
at your job, if you're in the office or someone you work with, and it's really hard to set boundaries with narcissists. And from my experience, usually once you set boundaries, then they're like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because they can't
Mm-hmm.
get the pie off of you anymore. But uh, yeah, and then there's family members are another. I don't know. What's your like? Do you think people should cut family members out if they are narcissists?
So, so I have, I think it depends on the situation, right? I mean, you're talking about situations where it was so bad, where your cortisol levels were through the roof to the point where you're getting skin rashes, which means your entire body's inflamed, right? Which means everything is off, right? Your heart rate, your breathing, your digestion, your vision, literally everything. And so this is why, obviously, why I wanted to have you on, but also for people to understand just how connected our mind and our bodies are. They're not separate. It's one thing. Um, do I think that cutting family members off? So I think it depends on the situation. I think that when you realize that the person you're dealing with is a narcissist, and you have that realization, you come to that understanding, you start to set boundaries. I really believe that you need to see what the response to your boundaries are, because I think it takes a little while to figure out the groove, right? Usually in anybody's relationships, you're in a dance, and that dance has been in place forever, right? Let's say it's with a mother. You go left, they go right, you go up, they go down, and you have been in this dance for 30, 40 years with them. Now all of a sudden, instead of going left, you're going to go right. And the person in the dynamic with you is totally thrown off. And they're going to say, well, they're not just going to go along with it. They're going to say, what are you doing? You're supposed to go right. You went left. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And you keep going the different direction. And one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to adjust with you, like your example of, going to the gym with you, or they're going to fight you on it and eventually discard you. It's too much effort. They're not getting any supply from you, and they're going to disconnect. Now, we know narcissists, when they discard you, particularly in families, they'll come back in ways like your birthday, holidays, they'll, sabotage something, or, they'll never fully leave. But I think it really depends on what you're willing to take at any given moment. And if you have the understanding that they're not going to change, I think that the boundaries need to be consistent, but I think you can have some wiggle room based on what the situation is. Maybe on Christmas, that you need to have really freaking strict boundaries for the month of December, right? But maybe those boundaries can become a little bit less intense at different times during the month or different events, whatever. But that's for you and you to figure out alone, not for the narcissist to decide.
Yeah.
When I think to cut off somebody, is it okay? 1,000% it is always okay to cut somebody out of your life, particularly a parent. If you in no way, shape, or form get, I know people are listening, but it's your mom, but it's your dad. And here's the thing. Yes, but you're the child. And we don't ask for our parents, right? We don't ask for the parents that we get. It's never a child's decision to disconnect. I don't care how old you are. And I want people to understand that for an adult child to cut off their parent, that is not a decision that they take lightly, nor is it something that they just woke up with and said, you know what? I'm done. We don't even do that with friends, let alone, we don't do that with strangers really. So it's not some decision you just, cool, I'm cool with this. Let's go. Let's do. It's a last resort.
Yeah.
Always. Always. And I think if you come to that point, I think you did it for a reason. And I commend the people that are able to do that because it is not easy. I don't look at it as we don't owe our parents anything. Okay.
Mhm.
We can be grateful for what they gave us, but if they abuse you, you don't owe them anything. And I stand by that. And I know people are going to disagree and say it's always workable, but it's not always workable.
Yeah.
And if you want to live a fulfilled life, sometimes it involves cutting out parents, which is horrible. And I think the worst thing, and I say this to all my patients, yes, it's sad and it's horrible and nobody should have to go through that. However, the one part of the grieving that I don't think people touch on, it's not just the loss of a parent, but it's also the loss of the daughter or the son that you could have been.
Mhm.
They kind of robbed you of the ability to be the best daughter you could be or the best granddaughter you could be, whatever the case may be. And I think that's something we don't talk about a lot.
Yeah. That was just a question from a friend.
Yeah.
I get a
Yeah,
lot of
no, I think it's important.
yeah.
I mean, you need to, I post this all the time that, it's, it's, it's not something that you ask for, but sometimes it's something you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I didn't find out until end of life with my mom that I was in that situation. So
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of learning to do then.
Do you think you would have done anything differently had you known that sooner?
Probably not much.
Yeah. Right. Right.
But I think just knowing and being able to put a name to it and
Yes.
why and and then being able to have that mind shift of like, oh, it's not me. I'm
Yes.
not unlovable.
Yes.
He's unable to love because of her
Yes.
condition. So I probably wouldn't have done anything different. I might have suffered a little less before
Mhm.
that, like wondering like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Uh, but that's it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's it. Listen, it's a huge thing to come to. And it's, we call this cognitive diffusion, where here's you and here's all your thoughts and they're intertwined and you can't separate them. And essentially what you're talking about is once you name something, once you give it something concrete and you can look at it rather than have it be all tangled up in you, you can separate the two. So now you are a spectator watching a sport rather than like in the sport yourself, but you're still not even playing. And so it doesn't matter what you do because you can't win because technically you're not the athlete in it. But if you separate yourself and you look at it, it gives you so much more space to be able to make more effective decisions for yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, it's still there. Yes, it's still upsetting, but you've now separated yourself by giving it a name.
Yeah.
And you can take that pause and make better, and you said this yourself, and make better choices for yourself,
Yeah.
you know? So tell people, I want to kind of have you brag about yourself for a little bit. Can you tell people all the amazing things that you do and that you have going on and where they can access that and information, and tell us a little bit about your audiobook?
Yeah. So I, of course, have Tone It Up for fitness and nutrition. You can go to toneitup.com for all that. And then The Big Silence, which I founded in 2021, which is all about mental health with the podcast where Dr. Z is on there too. And we talk to doctors and friends and, a lot of different people about all sorts of mental health topics. And then on thebigsilence.com, we have resources. We have a program called Therapy for All, where we sponsor therapy sessions. And yeah, my audiobook of my memoir is coming out in May. So, and there's bonus footage. So, my friend who is a therapist, we dive deeper into each section to really dig into why I maybe made certain decisions, why I reacted this way, how I worked through it. And so it'll be really good.
Yeah. So on Instagram, where can people find you and social media?
Yes. So on Instagram, Karena Dawn, and the big silence. And that's it.
Awesome. And my last question that I like to ask people, if you could just give one solid piece, little nugget of advice for people listening, what would it be?
Oh gosh. I think it would go back to be a kid, What did you love doing as a kid? And don't forget those little moments, because that's when you're carefree and just doing all the things. Play, have fun.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. You're amazing. And I'm so happy that we did this, and we'll definitely do it soon.
Yes. All right.
Right. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Z, and I am thrilled to announce the launch of my summer support series, Narcissistic Abuse Live Virtual Support Group. This is for those who are either currently experiencing narcissistic abuse or who have experienced narcissistic abuse in relationships of all kinds. You can register for the support group series on my website, drjamiezuckerman.com, and click the Workshops tab and scroll until you see Summer Support Series Live Virtual Support Group. This is a 4-session support group. Each group is an hour long from July 8th, July 15th, July 22nd, and July 29th, Mondays, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, to register and to get more info, head to my website, drjamiezuckerman.com, click on the Workshops tab, or if you have any questions or need additional information, please email info@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's info@drjamiezuckerman.com. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. I hope you found it useful, but most importantly, I hope you found it validating. Want to work one-on-one with me? Visit my website at drjamiezuckerman.com to book a personalized coaching session, and be sure to check out my on-demand workshops on topics like co-parenting with a narcissist, life after leaving, anxiety management strategies, and more. Again, that's drjamiezuckerman.com. You'll also find links to my interactive workbooks, merchandise, resources, and newsletter sign up. Next Up Narcissism is as much your podcast as it is mine. I want to hear your feedback and what you want to hear. So make sure to leave a podcast review wherever you listen, or send an email to nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next week to see what's up next on Next Up Narcissism.